Hey guys, Henry for Vinyl, Season 1, Episode 3, Whispered Secrets, and I was really looking forward to this episode. The first two episodes were really solid, and here's my thing with this episode. There are some things about this episode that I really did enjoy, and I think were very well handled, but this was by far my least favorite episode so far. In my opinion, the weakest entry. Mainly because it was a very messy, overstuffed episode. There was so much going on in this episode, and sometimes it was hard to tell what was a flashback or what was not. There was a very unnecessary plot point. Some of the direction they're going with some of the characters I don't really care about, and I really think the show is going to get back into gear next week, but this episode, I don't know, was very strange. Just something about it. It was strange. It didn't feel like the first two episodes, but let's just get into it because I definitely do want to talk about, because there were some things I definitely did like. For starters, the beginning. I thought the beginning of this episode was very strong. We see Richie and Devon, they're at this banquet honoring record producers, and Richie gets up, visits many of the producers there, including Maury, and Jackie Jervis from Coronet Records then goes up to the podium, and he interrupts the band performing and talks about how they're giving a Lifetime Achievement Award to Maury, which is who the banquet is for, and he welcomes some of the other producers there, including Barry Gordy, Neil Bogart, which I didn't have a problem with this. I heard people say they have a problem with them having actual producers, but no, they would be there. I mean, think about it. Maury's one of the most beloved producers of all time, supposedly, in this show. So it would make sense that Barry Gordy would be there. I mean, that's just how it would be. So he introduces Richie, who Jervis somehow knew didn't sell the company, and this is something that Devon didn't know. He ridicules him for it, and I like this character, Jackie Jervis. He's a good threat for Richie, and he then tells Maury to get up and say a few words. Richie notices an empty spot reserved for Buck, and he keeps remembering killing Buck, and I think they're handling this very well. Every time he hears the word Buck, he gets a picture in his head. Just several things remind him of that death, and it makes sense. This is something that, he never wanted to do. He never wanted to get away with killing Buck, and now he knows he has. It's still stuck in his mind, and that's the reason for his cocaine addiction. That's the reason why he's been very distant. I mean, that's the reason for a lot of things. So he gets up, Devon asks him what the fuck that was about, and asks if he did or didn't sell the company, and he says nothing's gonna change. She says millions of dollars is what's gonna change, and he tells her not to discuss it right now. She takes a drink, then walks away, and Richie then goes to Jervis, and obviously wants to know where he got that information from, because all of a sudden, I mean, how did he know that he didn't sell the company? And he says he got it from his PR, Andrea Zato, who says she heard it from a girl who does her nails, and Richie tells her watch herself, and she says if he threatens her again, she'll tear his nuts off. Jervis says he just signed Dusty Springfield, who says that she loved working with him, but now that Polygram is out, she can't spend another year watching him flush his career down the toilet. And Richie then goes to Maury and asks him if Jervis hosting was his idea, because he's really upset that Jervis is hosting. I mean, this is clearly someone that is Richie's enemy, clearly someone that Richie is threatened by, and Maury says that, really none of this was his idea. And then Richie asks him about the detective, and Richie doesn't really believe the detective. He thinks the detective is just fishing and doesn't really have anything and just thinks they have information when they really don't. And Maury says that this happens all the time, not to worry about it, and Richie says they're not selling, and he's going in a new direction musically, and Maury says the producers out there don't give a shit about music, that's why they make money, and he says he doesn't know why he bothered with him, and very interesting stuff. I mean, the way he said that, you can tell these producers don't really care about the music, it's more about the money, and flashback to Richie episode 1, yeah, that's kind of what he cared about, but now that he's had this awakening, now he really cares about the music, and basically, Richie asks if he remembers Lester, a.k.a. Little Jimmy Little, and I'm glad that Lester came back up in this episode. It seemed like we kind of got away from that last week, and I'm glad we got back to it here. By far, the strongest stuff in the episode was with Lester. I'll definitely get into that. Maury says he remembers the one that had hits, and Richie says he had a couple blues tracks that never broke, and tells him he went to see him. Maury says he did to score some junk off some shine he couldn't break in 1952, and Richie says he did it to say hello. Maury tells him to say hello to a head shrinker. Richie puts cold water on his face and thinks back to his encounter with Lester, and this scene was incredible. Had the entire episode been like this scene, I would have loved this episode. He asks Lester how long he's been living up there, and Lester says a while. Richie asks if he's still married, talks about his marriage with Devon and the kids, and then asks him what he's doing for work these days. Lester says that he's the super there. Richie says it's a big responsibility. Lester says he mostly unclogs people's toilets because he keeps them grounded, and and you can tell that Lester is kind of a bitter man. I mean, he doesn't sound like he used to, and Lester says basically, Richie says he seems good, and says he always had the look in his eye like he knew something about the world that other people didn't. Lester says he's talking about him in the past tense, and Richie says he didn't know what to expect coming there. When he saw him the other night, he seemed different, and he guesses time changes people, and Lester says people change themselves, or they don't. Willingness is the key. And Richie asks if he's still playing guitar, and Lester says he manages a few bands, hires out DJs at parties, and keeps his toe in the water. And Richie tries to offer him a position. Lester asks why he came there. Richie shows him a package, then asks if he remembers the sessions they did after Little Jimmy Little stuff. They recorded a bunch of his originals, and the package are the tapes, and they still sound great. He still thinks that they sound really good, to the point where he thinks they could sweeten them up, maybe a horn, some drums, nothing heavy, just him and his voice, or at least as an album, Lester Grimes Sings the Blues, which is what Lester wanted. The problem is, that's not what Lester wants anymore, and that's not who he is anymore. He gets up from the couch. Richie says that they don't have to change anything. Lester asks if they then follow it up with a low down and dirty petty album, croaking lyrics over a guitar like old wino with a rotten throat, and Richie says he's offering an opportunity, and Lester says he lost his voice because of him, and he says his mother died 3 years ago. He couldn't even sing at her funeral. I mean, you can tell that things are really bad for Lester. He says he's not the one that told Golasso to shove his money up his ass, and he acts like it was him. And he told him that they both had to play ball. Lester says fuck what they told him. He told him bullshit, and he's telling him more now. And he clearly has no interest working with Richie. Richie says at least tell him he'll think about it, and Lester says to turn his ass around and walk through the door and don't ever come back. And a very powerful scene. It's very sad what happened to Lester, but it's very realistic as well. I mean, he didn't get to be who he wanted. He was savagely beaten. Now, I thought we were going to get some flashbacks of who Lester used to be. That would have made sense. But no, we get more flashbacks of Devon, which I gotta say, I'm not that interested in. I like Devon as a character. I really do. The thing that's making me like this is Olivia Wilde's performance. She really is killing it in this show, I have to say. But we find out in this episode that she had this dance company that really wasn't working as well as she wanted it to. They don't have a roof, they don't have a floor, they don't really have windows, basically, Libor tells Devon he can't thank her enough, and she says to thank her when they get the money. She tells him she wants him to have realistic expectations and says he needs to learn Gloria's name and stop treating her like the maid. She runs the board because she knows the people who are going to make this happen, like Paul Newman, who lives half a mile from there. All she knew was that this was a barn with no one in it, and Gloria says they're going to need another table. Now, Gloria is played by the woman that played Jessica in Flesh and Bone, which I thought was perfect for this. I mean, it would make sense that she, would play that, because the fact that Jessica, if you remember that character, was into ballet and dancing and things like that, and she's kind of playing the same character, just a bit more bitchy. And Devon says it makes it feel more intimate, like Libor had made everyone dinner. And Gloria asks Libor why she's paying a caterer if he's making them all dinner, and he says without her he only has dreams. And I just didn't really care as much about this as I wanted to. I get this is Devon's passion, I really do, but like 85% of the episode is devoted to this, and it really has nothing to do with the music, and it kind of sucks. I really wanted Richie and Devon's fighting to be more from him not being there or something like that, and that's not really what it is. We'll get into that. Richie goes to American Century. Cece updates him on who called, and one of them was Corso, and of course he's freaking out, because Corso, of course, helped him kill Buck, and he said it was just a matter of mutual interest, and to leave a message. Richie tells her to pop her head in if he calls again, and she reminds him he has a meeting with Zach, and he says he's going to need a minute. He heads into his office, drinks water, constantly thinking about the murder of Buck, and does coke to take his mind off it. And I do want to talk about this whole thing with coke. I've heard people say it's stupid that he's addicted, and yeah, I don't think that Richie should be addicted, but I do think that coke, especially because the rest of the people on the show just seem to do it, just casually, and Richie seems to have a problem with it. Yeah, it is kind of silly that out of all the characters, he has to have the problem. I mean, it seems like, oh, that's why we should care about this main character. But yeah, I think it would be a lot better if he just did it casually and not have it be an addiction, I think. But it makes sense, though, because he killed Buck, and now he kind of needs coke to take his mind off it, and he needs a lot more of it because it just helps him try to stay happy, and he's really not. So Julie then reads off artists for Richie to either keep or cut, and Richie and Zach clash over keeping status quo. Richie reminds them that they cut Deadwood, then got money to bring in new acts so they could promote the shit out of them, like they keep telling them they want to do, which Deadwood was an HBO show, so I don't know if HBO is trying to be like meta there, but that was actually kind of funny. They go over several other artists till they get to Indigo, who's a band finishing an album for them, and Richie says to let them see what they get. And Cece tells Zach that his account's on the phone. He left a bunch of messages, and Zach says he'll call him back. Richie says to not let him stop him, and Zach says he's got no fucking money left, so what's there to talk about? And Julie says they trimmed 70% of their roster, give or take. Richie says, now, here's the thing with Zach. This is the only thing we hear about Zach's plot point in this episode, which kind of sucked, because I like the direction we were going with Zach last week. You know, it really seemed like with Zach, we were going to get more into his family life, see what he's going through. It seemed really interesting, and we really didn't get into that, I think, in this episode, and I want to see more of that. So, basically, Zach says he'll call him back. Richie says not to let him stop him. Zach says he's got... Oh, I just read this. So, basically, Richie says it's big savings. Zach says it's not cash, and you generate cash for the lights and all that. And Scott says maybe they should save a little so he can take his girlfriend to Gray's Papaya. And Richie asks when they all became a bunch of crybabies. And Zach says it's since he stuck it up their asses. You know, he was ready to sell the company, but they weren't. And because of that, they're almost out of money. And Zach says now the valuation of the company is dog shit. Scott says they actually owe him money. Richie says that they should get one of their artists to record a Christmas album. Even the shitty ones sell. And Julie says it's already August, and Richie says to rush it since songs are written already, and Robert Goulet could do it. Skip suggests Sister Mary Melissa, and Richie says it shouldn't be too religious and turn his heavenly hands into his heavenly cuticles. And he says to move her contract and pick up her option. Lester, and basically... they're going to try to record this Christmas album. So Lester's then tending the elderly, and this DJ Herc keeps switching the record every few seconds. One of the songs gets them to dance. One of the men tell Herc he's not a real musician. Lester says to leave it alone. Herc asks if he's feeling what he's making, and Lester says he doesn't know if he's making anything, but he does know that he's trying, and he tells him to keep on. And you can tell that Herc is trying to do, like, hip-hop, but hip-hop wasn't really known yet, and I like that we are showing different types of music, because rock and roll wasn't the only music out there. There were other musics that there was other music that was starting to come out, and hip-hop was one of them. It wasn't really popular, but it was still starting to come out, and I like seeing that. I thought that was a really great scene. And especially, I hope that Herc does not get involved with Richie. Keep it strictly with Lester. Keep this as Lester trying to discover this. I like seeing that, and I think it's well done. So, Clark is then in a recording studio, watching the Milk Carton Kids perform. It's making him miserable since they don't know how to record. One of the singers keeps eating the mic. They've apparently been doing this for 3 days. One of the funniest scenes in the episode by far. But then we get to the thing that I thought was really necessary about this episode. Clark steps outside, and there's Alice Cooper. And he tells him he's from American Century, which Alice realizes is Richie's outfit. Clark saw him in Rochester, started the tour, and he was amazing, and asked if he got better. And here's what I'll say about this plot. This plot was basically done to show why Clark works at American Century. What he's good at, if he's good at his job, things like that. And Clark basically gives him the suggestion that he should be working with them and that he should go solo. Now, if this was the only scene in the episode, I would have been completely fine with that. The problem is, it's not the only scene in the episode. There are many other scenes where Clark and Alice Cooper talk, and it just felt filler. It felt completely filler. It felt completely unnecessary, and if we had the one scene, that'd be fine. But it just seemed like, oh, it's Alice Cooper. We gotta show him a lot. No, you really didn't need to. You could have just had that one scene and then be like, oh, maybe he'll go solo. If Clark is the reason for Alice Cooper going solo, that's really stupid. This gets ridiculous to the point where he ends up in, like, that fake guillotine thing. I mean, this whole thing was just stupid, and I don't even want to talk about it. I thought it was a really dumb plot, and it ended up being really unnecessary. And let me say this. I like the actor that played Alice Cooper. I thought he did a good job overall. He was pretty spot on, actually. But I really thought that a lot of these scenes with Alice Cooper were very necessary, and I wasn't a fan of them. So I'm not going to talk about the rest of this plot. I don't really care. And yeah. So the nasty bits then play all day and all night and all the night for Julie and Jamie. And Jamie doesn't think it's working. She thinks that they don't have their sound. And Julie's trying to tell her that now they sound like a band that should be on the radio. And it's true. They've kind of lost everything that made the nasty bits somewhat unique. And basically, Julie basically tells her she has no say in this and what the band does, and he even makes, and he makes pretty much every decision. Julie criticizes the lead guitarist, the bassist, they go over the song again, but then the owners come out in the middle of the song. Jamie says that she thought it would be fine since nobody was going to be in there till tomorrow, and the owners call the cops. Like, they literally say they're 5 hoodlums with guns, and that Jamie's like a prostitute, so they get the hell out of there, obviously, so that's a problem. And that was kind of the 70s. I mean, everyone thought that everyone was kind of rebellious, this. People, came across as in a certain way. You could come across a prostitute, things like that. So that was a very realistic scene. Really funny, but a really crazy scene as well, definitely. But it makes sense why that would happen. I mean, just the way that they looked, I can understand that. So, Devon sits on the couch, thinks back to better days when Richie recommended her to basically start her own theater company or her own Warhol factory. And I like this scene between Richie and Devon. I really do. It's just I don't care as much as I want to about Devon's company. I just don't. I want to care. I just don't care. I just felt like there was way too much of it in this episode. She says Gloria thinks there should be a ballet company and says that she should get her to do the modern shit she loves. And she says she doesn't want to do anything with Gloria, she's a bitch. Richie asks when they'll have another kid. Devon says she'll think about it, and you kind of see that this was their better days, and now they kind of regret some things, because later in a scene, Devon's asking Richie for money. They wake up their daughter Jenna, because they get into a whole fight. So basically, Richie discusses with Hal that he needs him to spin things so it doesn't look like American Century is sinking ship. Now, this was one of my favorite scenes by far. This scene with Hal, I loved it. Very funny stuff. He says Jervis is making them look bad. They're trimming the fat, staying lean. The old roster had no coherence. He also tells him he wants him to start a sub-label. American Century stays intact, but with a fresh input in-house that says the future. Hal says there are a lot of rumors about layoffs, and Richie says he's an integral part of the team, and he's going to keep him on. So, I'm interested in seeing what that sub-name is going to be. We'll have to see. I've heard some people say it's going to be like a Boardwalk Empire reference. That'd be really stupid because that doesn't say the future. That says the 1930s, so let's hope it's not that. Corso comes by, says he's becoming a really hard person to track down, like one of those animal people hunt with the antlers of Buck, and again, he's remembering Buck, and he asks if he remembers Nora and tells him that she's a singer, and has a voice like a gazelle, and says that she's the next Petula Clark, gives him a tape of her song. He says that that's what friends do, particularly friends that have a uniquely shared history together, and obviously Richie wants to know, what Corso knows about that, and Corso said there's nothing to worry about, and that, he's gone, and tells him to listen to Nora's tape, and then they'll make a record, and they'll promote the shit out of it. Richie says he'll listen to it. Nora thanks him. Before he leaves, Corso tells him that she can fuck like a dolphin. And we then get this scene with Alice and Clark. Again, I didn't really care too much about this scene here. So then we get this thing, though, with Devon. Devon's telling Richie that Gloria wants a check for $10,000. Richie says that he does too. And hold the phone here. I thought that Devon didn't have much of a life. I thought that she gave up her life with Richie. Why all of a sudden is she working this dance company? I mean, they didn't really show it last week. They didn't really do anything with it last week. To me, it seemed like she worked with Andy Warhol, and then she gave up that life last week, and now all of a sudden she's working this dance company. This just didn't work for me. I'm like, is this the present? Is this the past? And I realized this is the present, and it really didn't make any sense here. Basically Richie says that he does too, and they go over this whole thing with them not wanting, with Richie not wanting to give her money, probably for drugs is what he wants it for, and she says 10 is barely going to get them the roof, and he asks what he asks who's doing the roof, and she says they agreed to a 20, and it gets to the point where she says that the dancers are going to have to live there, and he makes this joke that really pisses her off, and she even tells him to get out of the bedroom. Like, it really was a crazy scene, but I just didn't care. I wanted to care more about the scene, and like I said, I just didn't care as much as I wanted to, unfortunately. It was a very good scene, but again, the dance company in general, I didn't care as much about, unfortunately. So then we get this great scene, though, with Lester. Lester, now, she does tell him, though, I do like what she says, that, fundraising is the strategy, and that's the way to go. So Lester then listens to old blues music, gets out his old guitar, sings, remembers when he could sing back in the 50s. It's a really effective scene. He really imagines if he had that success, as, Lester sings the blues. He imagines his wife and kids in American Century. He, just has this great life, but then he goes back to reality, and it's a really sad scene. He has this voice, he can't even sing anymore. He sounds like Wheezy. Remember the penguin Wheezy from, like, Toy Story? That's what he sounds like. He sounds very much like that. It's very sad, and Devon meets with Warhol after many years. He's surprised by how different she looks. He says she never calls him, and he says that he would call her back, and she says she's sorry. He tells her to sin, tells her it's like the past, but more like now, tells her everything is skinnier like the camera on her. He asks about the painting, and she says it's his of hers, and she was hoping he'd sign it so people would know he did it. Now, I really love the scenes between Warhol and Devon. They work very well together. It's just this whole dance company thing I'm just not as big as a fan of. I like more this painting stuff. He said that she knows he did it, and she says the signature that gives it value, and he asks if she wants to sell it. She tells him about the fundraiser and the dance company she's trying to build, and he says he can't dance, and then agrees to sign it, and Richie then jots down ideas for the sub-label. Cece tells him that Maury and Galasso just showed up, and Zach looks concerned because he knows that there's something up, definitely. They talked about Vohill, and Richie tells him how it played out, and Galasso thanks him for playing dumb, tells him if he's short on cash to let him know. Two detectives then discover Buck's body, so this is a problem now. So at the fundraiser, Gloria pretty much takes credit for the entire thing. The other woman tries to tell Labor that it's Devon in the portrait, and basically that's what happens there. So Kip watches Jeff Starship perform, which Jeff Starship, if you guys don't know, was the name for the Ramones, the lead singer of the Ramones, if you remember. Very interesting. So I don't know if they're trying to be like, oh, that's the Ramones, but interesting stuff. So Kip says he should board a Starship, and Jamie says at least he's not afraid to be who he is. Kip asks if she's pleased with who he is, and Jamie introduces Richie to the band. They go on to perform. Richie is not impressed. He asks what happened, and Jamie takes the blame, and, you know, he basically... I like that Jamie took the blame here, because, you know, she didn't want Julie to get in trouble, so she took the blame. It just shows how good of a person Jamie really is. Especially because a lot of people in the show aren't very nice, and she keeps insisting that they need to soften their sound if they want radio play, and Richie asks Julie if he's taking orders from her. Julie says he's not. He says there are 200 bands that sound like them, and he says that they fucked up. Jamie goes up to Kip, tells him to play another song by The Tube, I think it was, and this song gets the crowd going. It's much more faster, and basically, Richie is much more impressed. The crowd goes wild. Richie says as soon as they're done, he wants them to buy a round of drinks and tell them they're signing, and you can see that Richie is now going to work with the nasty bits, so I'm interested in seeing how that's going to be. Julie then asks what the fuck just happened, which, yeah, that was a good response. Richie then goes to his hotel room. He puts in Nora's tape, then gets a call from Corso, who tells him that they found Buck's body, but it will all be fine, and says to call him about Nora's tape, and, you know, basically not to worry about it. But that is a problem. I don't like that Corso's trying to avoid it, because it is definitely a problem, and Richie knows that, but Corso probably has done these things before and doesn't know. Richie definitely thinks it's going to be a problem, which I think it is going to be, definitely. I mean, if two police detectives are going to find out, they're definitely going to start to think. I mean, I don't know why they would, you know, they don't have any suspects right now of who could have done it. They just know that there's Buck Rogers' body there, and they don't know how it got there. So he says to call him out Nora's tape. He listens to Nora's tape, sits on the bed, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, guys, like I said, this episode could have been really great had it not been basically dominated by the Alice Cooper plot, which really didn't do anything. It just showed that Clark did his job and just, you know, taught Alice Cooper to go solo, which I thought was really unnecessary in the end. I don't really know what the point of that was. That one scene, the elevator, would have been fine, but the rest of the episode didn't really need it. I really felt that was very filler. And then this whole thing with Devon, I just don't care. It seems like it's come out of nowhere. You know, for Devon, it seems like she lost her entire life last week, and now it seems like, no, she didn't lose her life. Now she, you know, she has this dance company that she's trying to do, but Gloria's dominated it. I just don't really care, I gotta say, guys. I really wasn't a fan of the whole dance company plot. And it's not bad, it's just not, I think, the direction to take Devon. And I think the direction of her not really having much of a life because of Richie, I think that's a lot better. That really seemed like that's what they implied last week, and now it seems like the complete opposite. So I'm not as big as a fan of that. Let's talk about this whole murder case, because Corso's not making this seem like a huge deal. It's definitely a huge deal, and they definitely should be worried about it. I know that Corso probably has dealt with these things before, but it is a problem, and it's something that he definitely needs to, you know, take a little bit more seriously, because he's not, so I'll have to see what happens there. And then, you know, Richie signing Kip and the Nasty Bits. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. And Nora as well. He's probably going to sign Nora. We'll see what happens with that. Zach knows that there's definitely something going on. Zach is definitely suspicious. We'll have to see what's going on there. I like seeing the team against Richie, because, you know, he's the one that made them lose all this money. I think that's very interesting, what's going to happen there. Lester, I feel so bad for Lester. You know, he can't really sing anymore, but I am looking forward to seeing what's going to happen if he's going to take this deal with Richie. He's clearly not interested now, but it does look like next week he is going to end up in American Century somehow. We don't really know how, but we'll have to see what happens there. Overall, guys, like I said, very filler episode. Not as big as a fan of this one. I really love the first two, but this one I really was not as big as a fan of, I have to say. But let me know what you guys saw on this episode. We'll see you guys in my next show, which will be for 11/22/63, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.